Hello again, I am Blunty, and this is the Commlite cm-AEF-MFT Speed Booster. What a jumble of letters and acronyms that was. And while my recent adventures in New York and Beijing haven't left me much time to do a full dig deep review, I did just use this thing as my one and only option on my camera in Beijing for a throw it in the deep end kind of field test. So I'm feeling ready to throw down a verdict and a mighty Blunty judgment upon it. Before we go on, I'm feeling compelled, because YouTube is effing me in the A more aggressively than usual lately, that please hit that subscribe button, and please hit that bell button, and please do whatever you can to watch my videos, because they're starting to be buried again. It's kind of frustrating. Now, just quickly for those unfamiliar, a speed booster is designed to take DSLR lenses, in this case a Canon EF lens, and mount them onto your Micro Four Thirds cameras. But more than just adapting the lens mount, it's also got its own optics in there, its own lenses, which squeezes the DSLR lens's larger image projection down to more properly fit the Micro Four Thirds sensor. And this does two things. It makes the lens field of view work like it's supposed to on the larger sensor cameras, so that focal distance works as you'd expect it to work, and it concentrates the light, giving you effectively a larger aperture, a faster, brighter lens, which is why we call them speed boosters. And unlike the basic speed booster I reviewed a couple of months back, this one is smart. This one has electronics. This one has the same 0.71 times magnification, but this one actually functions with the camera's autofocus properly. It's much slower with autofocus than a native lens is, and it does have a little bit of trouble in the dark, but under more friendly conditions, the autofocus does work well enough. And although I still spent about half the time focusing manually, it's really nice to have a properly working autofocus when using this kind of adapter. I wouldn't rely on it for sports or wildlife and stuff like that, where focus needs to be as quick as possible, but for the average YouTuber, and certainly for the kind of stuff I do, it's perfectly fine. Not ideal, but fine. The other, and perhaps more important thing that this does over the cheaper model I reviewed a couple months back, is this one also has proper electronic control over the lens's own aperture blades. The cheapy one had to rely on its own built-in aperture blades to give you some control over light, but that resulted in possibly very heavy vignetting, so it was of limited use. But here, with this one, because it uses the lens's own aperture blades and leaves control over them to the camera itself, all of this works just like a native lens does. So it's both easier, faster, more accurate, and more importantly, repeatable. And of course, you don't have the issue with vignetting at all, unless of course the lens itself behaves that way natively anyway. The hardware itself, the build quality is pretty good. I'm confident enough in it. It's built largely of aluminium alloy. It felt quite stable and secure on the camera. Nothing rattled or squeaked or wobbled or anything like that. And it has a good, strong locking mechanism. The contact pins are gold-plated to protect against corrosion messing with connection, and it transmits XF information from the lens settings right down to correctly transmitting the lens manufacturer and model ID and even the serial number of the lens properly. That's something else the cheaper one doesn't do, of course. The adapter also has a USB port should it ever need a firmware update to correct for an unforeseen issue with a new camera body or a new lens, for example, and Commlite has been around for a while, so there's no particular worry that support on that side will vanish. The test shots you're seeing were all shot with easily the most popular lens people use with this kind of adapter, and in fact the reason some people buy this adapter at all for their Micro Four Thirds cameras, like the G5 I'm using, and that is of course the ever classic Sigma 18-35 Art Series lens, one of my personal all-time favourite lenses. It is glorious. And aside from the slightly sluggish autofocus, which by the way can also create a bit of motor noise, nothing dramatic, but if you're doing video and only using on-board microphones like some sort of retrobate cave person, be aware that motor noise is probably going to be recorded. But yeah, aside from the slower than native autofocus, I'm really very happy with how this thing performed. Optically, it kept itself out of the way. There may be slightly more lemoning to the shape of the bokeh at the edge of the frame than this lens normally does natively, but frankly, I kind of like that. Your mileage may vary. And if you wanted to pixel peep, you may also see some expected artifacts from putting another unexpected lens in the path of the light of this lens, such as slight softening and a very slight touch of haloing from time to time under very specific circumstances. But by and large, I am perfectly satisfied with this adapter not messing with the things that I love so much about what this lens does. And the speed boost factor certainly made low light stuff a bit of a joy with this combination. And as I said, in very low light the autofocus becomes much less useful, but with a camera like the G5, which has some superb and very reliable manual focus assist features built in, it's really not a huge issue for me, and well worth the trade-off for just how well this lens does work in low light, giving me what reads to the camera as f1.2 aperture versus the f2.8 on the 12-35 native Lumix lens that I usually use as my daily driver. It made a significant difference. And I'm going to tell you this much. I am going to be personally continuing to use this lens and this adapter combo. And if you're coming to PAX Australia this weekend, you'll see me using it, I guarantee it. And that really is the litmus test, isn't it? When I review something, if I personally keep using it to make my own content, you know that I'm happy with it. You know that I feel confident in recommending it. And that's how I feel about this thing. Absolutely worth a look if you're in the market for a speed booster that keeps the electronic connections, gives you autofocus, gives you EXIF information, gives you aperture control, but doesn't cost as much as a whole new friggin' lens can, like some speed boosters do, because this thing is currently listing on Amazon at $315, which is significantly cheaper than some of the popular big name alternatives. And I mean significantly, like less than a third of the cost. Whew. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.